I knew nothing about business in those days. I absolutely nothing, no experience whatsoever. I actually always intended to be an academic. I did a PhD in history. What do you do with a PhD in history? Well, you know, you mow lawns for a living. That's what I did. And I started with nothing. And you look back upon that time, which is nearly 37 years ago now, and you ask, how did I get from there to here? Well, I did have one particular advantage. I was really, really passionate about my customers. I was one of the first contractors in Australia to own a brush cutter. This was as a student. I went into the shop. Because I used to get so annoyed at edges. When I was mowing lawns back as a student, I would be doing the lawn mowing really well, but I couldn't get the edges right. I mean, you could do the wheeled edge, but you couldn't get around the trees and the clotheslines, the retaining walls, and that used to bug me. And one day I was in my mower shop, and the guy was fixing, my old bloke called Tom was fixing my mower for me, and I was wandering around the shop and I saw this little weird looking thing in the corner, which is a long pole with a little engine on one end and a funny looking thing with a white cord on the other. And I said to him, "What's that?" He said, "It's a brush cutter." I said, "What?" He said, "It's a new idea just out from Japan." And he showed me how it worked. And I thought, I have got to have that thing so I can do all my edges properly. It was a lot of money, more than a mower. I bought it on the spot. Everything I could do to make my clients happy, I did. I can remember going in to mow a lawn and seeing a little ball of grass that big left on the lawn, the other side of it. I walk across, pick it up and throw it. My lawns had to be perfect. Edges had to be perfect. And clients would say to me things like, "I never knew my lawn could look this good." And I had to be on time. I hated letting customers down. And one time I remember mistaking my diary and I let a couple of customers down and I was so upset about it. I just had this thing that my customers had to be amazed and had to be delighted. So despite the fact that I started so badly, what I found was when I got out there and started working, customers loved me. And I turn once-offs into regulars, and I get referrals and all kinds of things. People just loved the work I did and the service that I gave, and I did so well. And then I started to build the business, and I started focusing on building up and selling lawn mowing rounds, which was okay for a bit, got me out of debt. You know, I managed to put some money down my first house, so I was doing all right. But one of the problems I had was that the service that I gave through my subbies wasn't particularly good. It wasn't there. And it used to upset me because I would give great service, but my subbies didn't. And just to give you some idea how bad it was, roughly speaking, for every 100 leads we were getting in those days, we get about 100 complaints of some kind of about poor service, mostly letting customers down. I wasn't happy with this. And then towards the end of the 80s, under stress of competition from VIP that came in from Adelaide, and they were franchising, I decided to franchise myself. And I didn't have any particular concept of how good this could be. I had no vast plan to conquer the planet. I honestly did not. Somebody asked me at that time, "How many franchises do you think you might have one day?" And I said, "Look, if it works out really, really well," I'm not saying it will, but if it works out well, one day I could have 100 franchisees. By the end of the first year, I had 60, and I thought, what is this? And it started to grow, and it really, really surprised me. But one of the things that I put into the system was a system that drove customer service. So right from the beginning, one of the things I was determined to do, I wasn't going to take franchisees that didn't give great service. So I used to actually, not only interview, but I would trial them, which wasn't very usual in those days. I'm not even sure it's usual now in the service industry, but I'd take them out on the road, take them out with a couple of my top guys, and I'd say, "Are these people good enough? Are they going to look after my customers properly?" And if they didn't, I would not take them. So even though I really wanted to grow, I wasn't going to take anybody who wouldn't look after my customers. So that was the start. And then I got to a certain stage, and actually, with franchising, with good selection, the complaints started to drop. And I can remember looking at the system just a few years down the track of it, and I noticed that for every 100 leads, in the past I make up 100 jobs. Sorry, 100. I get about 100 complaints. Now, for every 100 leads, we're getting about 5 complaints. That's pretty good. That's a 95% improvement. But I thought this isn't really good enough. So I started putting extra sections in place. One of the things I tried fairly early on was one of the problems you have when you're giving out work, especially if you've got a lot of work, which we often do, is people tend to ignore the jobs. So we said, okay, rather than just charging a flat fee like we used to do, like all of our competitors were doing, I've put a lower flat fee per month. And I would charge a small fee for every lead provider. We call it the lead fee. That was just an experiment. I didn't know it was going to work. I tried it on some franchisees. And what I did is ring the customers and ask them. And it was really interesting. What I found was, and you've got to understand, both these sets of franchisees weren't paying about the same average fee. It was a fixed fee plus lead fee. It came to about the same thing overall. But when I rang the customers, a very interesting thing happened. The customers that were Ghost, somebody was on fixed fee, about 25% of the customers had no response. Where there was a lead fee, 3% of customers had no response. And what was more, whereas with the lead fee, we were converting about 3/4 of our leads into jobs. With the fixed fee, it was less than half. So not only did we have 1/8 as many customers unhappy, but we're getting 50% more actual work from the same volume of leads. Because what would happen is a franchisee who's very, very busy knows if they take a job they're likely to burn it, they would ring up the office and say, don't send me anything else. And then the job would go to the next person who'd say, wacko, I want this job. And some franchisees, I'll be honest with you, they find this a negative because sometimes you'll get a lead and you won't convert it. And we still charge for it. We only charge usually 85% of the leads, but we still charge for it because it drives performance and it incentivizes people to take the job only if they really want it, if they take it to convert it. And we find on average about 3 out of 4 of our leads turn into jobs. Some franchises do better, some worse, but that's about the average. So then, but that was good. And it's starting to look better. And the complaint rate's starting to come down a bit. I thought, this isn't good enough. And we noticed we were getting some complaints, and we found that there was a small minority of franchisees who were getting far more than their share of complaints. So we set up this system, this automated system, which is all IT based now, whereby we monitor the level of complaints. Now, most franchisees are pretty good to have no problems. But what we set up a system, if a franchisee gets 6 complaints within 6 months and at least 6% of total leads, then they get a warning letter. The letter's nothing in itself, but it just says, hey, you got to lift your socks. Mostly with this, we find they do better. If not, 6 more complaints within 6 months, at least 6% of leads, they get a second letter. This is a breach notice. This is really serious. No more work until you do a retraining session, which is pretty tough. Doesn't happen very often, but it's pretty scary. Costs them up to $250, depending on how many people are doing it. And then from that time onwards, every complaint they get is sent automatically to me. And I will look at what they're doing, and if they get more, they keep on getting complaints, we will cut them off from work or tell them to sell. We will not tolerate it. It's a very small minority of franchisee, but it really tough on the people who are doing it. Now, as we did this, put this into place, we noticed the actual level of complaints kept on going down to about 1.5%. From 100 to 5 to 1.5, still better. And I thought, this is not good enough still. We're still getting too many complaints. And so we put another system in place. We started asking our clients to fill in surveys, automated surveys, these days mostly by mobile phones. What do you think? Score 1 to 5. And when there was a bad survey come back, we treat that as a complaint. And we started looking at things like, we started giving our franchisees who were getting better results, which is most of them actually, slight priority in terms of work. And then we started rewarding and incentivizing people who do well, and they can put stickers on their trailer and stuff. And the complaints go down and down further. Latest figures, starting off from 100 complaints per lead, per 100 leads, to 5 to 1.5. Latest figures is about 3/4. Now we're putting a whole stack more stuff in place. Over the next year, I'm determined to see that level drop down by half. Now, On top of all this, I personally take a very strong involvement with complaints. I personally check out virtually every complaint in the system every day. And any client that has an issue that's not solved by one phone call, if they even make a second time about a complaint that's not fixed, it comes straight to me and I will sit on it until it's filled. So as CEO of the company, with nearly 4,000 franchisees, I am personally, directly involved. I'm the only person that can delete a complaint or report a survey, which I will if there's evidence. Sometimes clients are just unreasonable. In franchise, you'll ring, they'll text, and the client says no contact. Well, here's the phone call, here's the text, you did it, delete. So we take a role there. Now, there's a very interesting thing. You might ask, why am I such a fanatic? And I got to say that this creates a certain amount of pressure and unhappiness amongst my franchisees at times. So why do I push customer service so hard? What's interesting thing is this. In the early days of gyms, it was quite hard to find work. I actually had teams of canvassers going out, knocking on doors. That's how difficult it was. As the years have gone by, and as that complaint rate has gone down, the volume of leads has risen dramatically. It's rising and rising. Last year, we knocked back more than 180,000 leads. More than 180,000 times, which is about 1 time in 4, a customer rings us and we cannot handle them. Now, we're still growing as an organization, but our number of leads is growing faster than we can possibly take on people to look after it. And what that obviously means is that as the years go by, less and less of our franchises are reporting poor income. So even though this is a very tough way of doing it, and if you're a franchisee getting one of these letters, you are not going to like me very much. But at the same time, it has this dramatic effect in that as the complaints have gone down, as the service has improved, the volume of leads has gone up. Now, that is service to our customers. But there is one group of customers that's actually more important to us than that. And that is our franchisees. And we see our franchisees as our customers. Now, when I first started the system, my vision for this was that I wanted my customers, my primary customers, my franchisees, to be raving fans. That was the whole idea. I set up a contract which is unique in the world of franchising in terms of the way we look after our franchisees. I'm going to give you just a very brief idea of how this works. For example, we give our franchisees total ownership of territory. A job comes into their territory, they get it, but our franchisees can take work wherever they wish. They get a referral, anybody else, they can take the work. There is no limit to where they can work. There is no limit to how big their franchise can become, and fees do not increase. We've got franchisees with 3, 4, 5 trailers on the road with lots of employees. Their base fee is the same. They might pay slightly more lead fees, but their base fees are the same. This was all in the original contract. We give our franchisees ownership of clients. We cannot, by contract, take a customer off our franchisees without their consent. Now, when I was setting the system up, I had a lot of arguments with the lawyers. It took me 9 months. Basically, they kept on saying to me, "You're being too nice. This is crazy. Nobody runs a franchise like you're giving your franchisees too much power." And I said, "No, I'm going to make my franchisees into fans. They're going to make them love what we do." And they said, "You are going to soften this with time. You're going to give yourself more power." Actual fact, the exact opposite happened. We put in systems with time. For example, our franchisees with time were given the right to change their franchisor. So if a franchisee is not getting the right service, not enough jobs, they can actually go to a neighbouring franchisor and say, "I want to be part of your region." Their own franchisor has no say. So if the franchisor doesn't look after the franchisee well, they can lose them. And this has happened in the past. You've got a franchisor not doing a brilliant job. The franchisee started to drift across, and it puts so much pressure on them either to lift their game or to go. We've also given our franchisees the right to veto changes to their own manual. If we want to change the franchisee's manual in any way whatsoever, we actually have to put out a referendum, write to them and say, "Do you accept this change?" And if they don't accept it, it cannot go ahead by contract. This is the only franchising system in the world that allows franchisees to veto changes to their own manual. Plus, and this is really radical stuff, our franchisees have the right to vote out their own franchisor. If they're not happy with the service the franchisor has given them, they can vote them out. And this would apply to me directly. Since I'm a franchisor myself or run the division, I can be voted out if I don't give my franchisees good service. So I'm in no different situation to anybody else. This is very, very unusual thinking. And all I can say is to people who say this is crazy stuff, it actually does work pretty well. And I think our growth talks about that. We've also put a lot of pressure on our franchisors in different ways. Just as we survey our clients, we also survey our franchisors. So once a year, around about June, our franchisees get sent a questionnaire asking them about how their franchisor is doing. This is confidential. The franchisor is not going to know the answer. How often does your franchisor ring you? Weekly, monthly, less. How quickly do they get back to you? How helpful are they? How many meetings have you been invited to attend? And how do you rate your income? Not the actual amount, but is it good, satisfactory, poor? Now, the results of this survey are really, really serious stuff. The best result is to be a diamond. It didn't even exist until 3 years ago, but as the levels of services improved, we give awards out. And the franchisors we have a ceremony which actually in July, we just finished one, where we give out these awards, these gold, platinum, diamond awards, which the franchisors could put on their wall, they can put in their newsletter. So this is, if they don't do well, and a few don't do very well, they get something a bit less nice than a award, they get a breach notice. And then we re-survey their franchisees to see if their service is improved. It's not difficult to get a breach notice in our system. Even just if you don't ring your franchisees regularly, you can be breached for lack of service. That's how seriously we take it. Puts a lot of pressure. So just as we pressure our franchisees to provide great service to customers, so we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to provide great service to our franchisees who are our primary customers. And all I can say is it's very strange the way we look at things, but if you ever look at some of the problems that have been going on in franchising lately with Retail Food Group, which I'm sure you're all aware of, they're basically things that would be completely impossible under our system. Even if I wanted to act like that, I cannot change my own manual. Our franchisees have a right of renewal after 10 years if they're compliant. We cannot change that. We cannot grab their business back from them. We've actually restricted ourselves in an extraordinary number of ways to make sure that we have to look after our franchisees correctly.